The room was dark, but not quiet. A thin hum of the city outside pressed against the window, and inside, a single clock ticked stubbornly, cutting through the silence like a heartbeat that refused to rest. The scientist lay on his back, eyes open, tracing the cracks on the ceiling as if they were constellations. He had been awake for hours, yet sleep hovered just out of reach, teasing him, mocking him. And then came the thought, the one thought that always arrived when the world slowed enough to let it through. What is time, really? Is it a river carrying us forward against our will? Is it a prison, or is it a gift? He could feel the question tightening around him, an invisible thread pulling at his chest. And in that fragile silence, he wondered if tonight, in the space between waking and dreaming, he might finally find an answer. Cinematic intro hooked, the screen fades into black. A faint ticking echoes, slow and heavy. Then, a whisper of narration rises, wrapping around the listener like a secret meant only for them. What if time was not what you thought it was? What if every tick of the clock was not a measure, but a question? What if the seconds you hear are not passing, but waiting for you to notice them? The clock stops, silence, and then, softly, almost like a lullaby, you are not here by accident. You are here because, like Himtha, dreaming scientist, you too have felt that question haunting your nights. Stay close now. Let the story guide you. And if you wish to walk through more doors like this, whisper back to us by subscribing to the Whispering Cosmos. Together, we will step into mysteries that refuse to sleep. The ticking resumes, but slower, deeper, pulling the audience inward. The scientist's eyes burned with fatigue, but his mind was alive, restless. He turned onto his side, watching the faint glow of the bedside clock. 3:03 a.m. The numbers seemed strange, as though they were not measuring anything real, just flickering symbols mocking him with their order. He wondered if he turned away, if he closed his eyes long enough, would time itself forget to move forward? He tried to remember the last time he had lost himself in a moment, completely, without counting minutes or hours. Perhaps when he was a boy, lying in the grass, staring at the sky. Or the day he first held a book that explained the mysteries of the universe and believed, just for a moment, that answers could be found between its pages. Those moments felt endless, eternal. So why now did every moment feel so fragile, slipping from his grasp the instant it arrived? The clock ticked. He sat up, rubbing his face, and the sound became louder, sharper, almost unbearable. He stared at the clock. Its red digits glowed faintly. Its hands moved with stubborn certainty. He whispered to himself, half in despair, half in awe, "Who controls you?" No one answered, of course. Only the silence of the room, heavy with the weight of sleeplessness. But in his chest, something stirred, a strange rhythm, like a second heartbeat. He pressed his hand to his sternum, uncertain if he was awake or drifting already into some half-dream. The scientist rose and walked across the room. His bare feet touched the cold floor, grounding him, yet the air felt unreal, as though the walls themselves were dissolving. He reached for the clock on his desk, lifting it to his ear. Tick, 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 tick. The sound slowed. Or perhaps his perception slowed. Each tick stretched into an eternity, as if he could walk between the seconds and linger there. He closed his eyes, and then nothing. The ticking stopped. He opened his eyes, holding the clock in disbelief. The second hand was frozen in place. His breath caught. For the first time in his life, he was staring at silence made visible. A world without time, his mind raced. Was it broken? Or had he broken free of something greater? He looked around the room. The curtains swayed gently, but the air felt heavier, stiller, like a painting instead of life. His chest tightened with both wonder and fear. What if this was the answer? What if time could, in fact, stop? What if he had stepped into that impossible space between seconds, the place no one was meant to enter? He laughed nervously, shaking his head, but the silence held. He tapped the glass of the clock. Nothing. He set it back down, and the room seemed to lean toward him, listening. That's when he heard it. A faint whisper, so soft, it might have been the echo of his own thoughts. Do you really want to know who controls the clock? He froze. The whisper came again, this time clearer, though no one was in the room with him. If you do, follow the silence. The scientist's skin prickled. His rational mind screamed that it was just exhaustion, just the tricks of sleeplessness. But another part of him, the part that still carried, the wonder of a child staring at the stars, leaned closer to the sound. The walls of the room seemed to ripple, faintly, like the surface of water. He stepped forward, his fingers brushing the wallpaper, and felt it bend beneath his touch, as though it were not solid at all. The whisper came again, urgent this time. Come, before the ticking returns. His heart pounded. He turned back toward the bed, toward the ordinary world of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. But then he looked at the frozen clock. The second hand still refused to move, and with a trembling breath, he placed his hand flat against the wall. It dissolved beneath his touch. He stumbled forward, through the surface of his room, and into a hallway lined with clocks. They stretched endlessly in both directions, thousands of them, hanging on walls that glowed faintly, like the inside of a dream. Each one ticked differently, some fast, some slow, some backward, some forward. The sound was overwhelming, a storm of moments colliding. The scientist stood in the corridor of time, trembling, wide-eyed, unable to breathe. From somewhere among the infinite ticking, a single clock began to move in reverse. Its hands spun backward, faster and faster, until the numbers blurred, and a voice, not whispering this time but echoing, filled the hall. The corridor stretched endlessly, a cathedral of ticking hearts. The scientist stood motionless, his breath caught somewhere between wonder and terror. Thousands of clocks loomed around him on the walls, the ceiling even floating in the air like strange planets in orbit. Some clicked furiously, as though racing toward some desperate finish line. Others moved painfully slow, their hands dragging like exhausted travelers. And then there were those that spun backward, undoing their own moments, erasing the very idea of direction. He reached for the nearest one, a heavy brass clock that swung its pendulum in perfect silence. His fingers brushed the cold metal, and in that instant his body stiffened. The world froze. Every sound stopped, the clocks, the air, even the soft beat of his heart. The second he touched the pendulum, existence itself seemed to pause, as though the entire corridor had been caught mid-breath. His eyes darted wildly, but nothing moved. His chest heaved as panic rose. He had dreamt of stopping time before, but this was different. It was not the fantasy of control, it was suffocation, like being caught beneath a frozen lake, trapped between worlds of motion and stillness. The scientist whispered hoarsely into the silence, "Is this what eternity feels like?" The words echoed strangely, not from his mouth, but from everywhere around him, bouncing off unseen walls. He stepped back, his hand trembling, and the pendulum swayed gently again. The frozen second released him. The clocks resumed their chaotic chorus, some laughing, some groaning, some weeping in their strange mechanical voices. He staggered forward, deeper into the corridor. His bare feet echoed faintly against the polished floor, though he could not see where it ended. The glow from the clocks pulsed like candlelight, throwing shadows that danced in unpredictable shapes. Each shadow seemed alive, whispering secrets he could not quite hear. Then he noticed one clock among thousands, different from the rest. Its glass face was cracked, its hands trembling violently, as if fighting against themselves. He approached it cautiously. Talk, tick, dash, talk, 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 dash, talk, 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 dash, talk, dot. But the rhythm faltered, breaking, shuddering, dot, and then, suddenly click. The second hand stopped. The scientist leaned closer, his breath fogging the cracked glass. And in that frozen second, he saw something impossible, not his reflection, but a faint image of a child. The boy stared back at him with wide, innocent eyes that were unmistakably his own. His childhood self, trapped inside the glass, lips moving soundlessly. The scientist's heart jolted. He pressed his ear to the clock. Faintly, as if carried through centuries, he heard the boy whisper, "Why did you leave me behind?" He stumbled back, clutching his chest, his mind spinning. Was it a hallucination? A dream memory bleeding into this strange place? He wanted to speak, to answer, but the boy's image blurred, dissolving back into the cracked glass until nothing remained but his own frightened reflection. The corridor seemed to tighten around him, the walls inching closer with each heartbeat. The clocks grew louder, their ticking sharp as knives. He pressed his palms against his ears, but the sound burrowed inside his skull, growing louder, faster, until it became unbearable, and then silence. Every clock stopped at once. The corridor stood utterly still, every pendulum frozen in mid-swing, every hand halted mid. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the noise. The scientist whispered shakily into the void, "Who has done this?" The room was dark, but not quiet. A thin hum of the city outside pressed against the window, and inside, a single clock ticked stubbornly, cutting through the silence like a heartbeat that refused to rest. The scientist lay on his back, eyes open, tracing the cracks on the ceiling as if they were constellations. He had been awake for hours, yet sleep hovered just out of reach, teasing him, mocking him. And then came the thought, the one thought that always arrived when the world slowed enough to let it through. What is time, really? Is it a river carrying us forward against our will? Is it a prison, or is it a gift? He could feel the question tightening around him, an invisible thread pulling at his chest. And in that fragile silence, he wondered if tonight, in the space between waking and dreaming, he might finally find an answer. Cinematic intro hook. The screen fades into black. A faint ticking echoes, slow and heavy. Then, a whisper of narration rises, wrapping around the listener like a secret meant only for them. What if time was not what you thought it was? What if every tick of the clock was not a measure, but a question? What if the seconds you hear are not passing, but waiting for you to notice them? A low voice answered, though no figure appeared. You asked for the truth. You touched the pendulum. Now you must walk without its mercy. The words slithered through the air like smoke, sinking into his bones. He turned in every direction, but saw no one. His legs trembled, but curious the clock stops, silence, and then, softly, almost like a lullaby, you are not here by accident. You are here because, like Himtha, dreaming scientist you to have felt that question haunting your nights. Stay close now. Let the story guide you. And if you wish to walk through more doors like this, whisper back to us by subscribing to the Whispering Cosmos. Together, we will step into mysteries that refuse to sleep. The ticking resumes, but slower, deeper, pulling the audience inward. The scientist's eyes burned with fatigue, but his mind was alive, restless. He turned onto his side, watching the faint glow of the bedside clock. 3:03 a.m. The numbers seemed strange, as though they were not measuring anything real, just flickering symbols mocking him with their order. He wondered if he turned away, if he closed his eyes long enough, would time itself forget to move forward. He tried to remember the last time he had lost himself in a moment, completely, without counting minutes or hours. Perhaps when he was a boy, lying in the grass, staring at the sky, or the day he first held a book that explained the mysteries of the universe and believed, just for a moment, that answers could be found between its pages. Those moments felt endless, eternal. So why now did every moment feel so fragile, slipping from his grasp the instant it arrived? The clock ticked. He sat up, rubbing his face, and the sound became louder, sharper, almost unbearable. He stared at the clock. Its red digits glowed faintly. Its hands moved with stubborn certainty. He whispered to himself, half in despair, half in awe. Who controls you? No one answered, of course. Only the silence of the room, heavy with the weight of sleeplessness. But in his chest, something stirred a strange rhythm, like a second heartbeat. He pressed his hand to his sternum, uncertain if he was awake or drifting already into some half-dream. The scientist rose and walked across the room. His bare feet touched the cold floor, grounding him, yet the air felt unreal, as though the walls themselves were dissolving. He reached for the clock on his desk, lifting it to his ear. Tick, 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 tick. The sound slowed, or perhaps his perception slowed. Each tick stretched into an eternity, as if he could walk between the seconds and linger there. He closed his eyes, and then nothing. The ticking stopped. He opened his eyes, holding the clock in disbelief. The second hand was frozen in place. His breath caught. For the first time in his life, he was staring at silence made visible, a world without time. His mind raced. Was it broken, or had he broken free of something greater? He looked around the room. The curtains swayed gently, but the air felt heavier, stiller, like a painting instead of life. His chest tightened with both wonder and fear. What if this was the answer? What if time could, in fact, stop? What if he had stepped into that impossible space between seconds, the place no one was meant to enter? He laughed nervously, shaking his head, but the silence held. He tapped the glass of the clock. Nothing. He set it back down, and the room seemed to lean toward him. Listening, that's when he heard it. A faint whisper, so soft. It might have been the echo of his own thoughts. "Do you really want to know who controls the clock?" He froze. The whisper came again, this time clearer, though no one was in the room with him. "If you do, follow the silence." The scientist's skin prickled. His rational mind screamed that it was just exhaustion, just the tricks of sleeplessness. But another part of him, the part that still carried the wonder of a child staring at the stars, leaned closer to the sound. The walls of the room seemed to ripple, faintly, like the surface of water. He stepped forward, his fingers brushing the wallpaper, and felt it bend beneath his touch, as though it were not solid at all. The whisper came again, urgent this time. "Come, before the ticking returns." His heart pounded. He turned back, toward the bed, toward the ordinary world of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. But then he looked at the frozen clock. The second hand still refused to move, and with a trembling breath, he placed his hand flat against the wall. It dissolved beneath his touch. He stumbled forward, through the surface of his room, and into a hallway lined with clocks. They stretched endlessly in both directions, thousands of them, hanging on walls that glowed faintly like the inside of a dream. Each one ticked differently, some fast, some slow, some backward, some forward. The sound was overwhelming, a storm of moments colliding. The scientist stood in the corridor of time, trembling, wide-eyed, unable to breathe. From somewhere among the infinite ticking, a single clock began to move in reverse. Its hands spun backward, faster and faster, until the numbers blurred. Not whispering this time, but echoing, filled the hall. The corridor stretched endlessly, a cathedral of ticking hearts. The scientist stood motionless, his breath caught somewhere between wonder and terror. Thousands of clocks loomed around him on the walls, the ceiling, even floating in the air like strange planets in orbit. Some clicked furiously, as though racing toward some desperate. Others moved painfully slow, their hands dragging like exhausted travelers. And then there were those that spun backward, undoing their own moments, erasing the very idea of direction. He reached for the nearest one, a heavy brass clock that swung its pendulum in perfect silence. His fingers brushed the cold metal, and in that instant his body stiffened. The world froze. Every sound stopped, the clocks, the air, even the soft beat of his heart. The second he touched the pendulum, existence itself seemed to pause, as though the entire corridor had been caught mid-breath. His eyes darted wildly, but nothing moved. His chest heaved as panic rose. He had dreamt of stopping time before, but this was different. It was not the fantasy of control, what was suffocation, like being caught beneath a frozen lake. Trapped between worlds of motion and stillness, the scientist whispered hoarsely into the silence. "Is this what eternity feels like?" The words echoed strangely, not from his mouth, but from everywhere around him, bouncing off unseen walls. He stepped back, his hand trembling, and the pendulum swayed gently again. The frozen second released him. The clocks resumed their chaotic chorus, some laughing, some groaning, some weeping in their strange, mechanical voices. He staggered forward, deeper into the corridor. His bare feet echoed faintly against the polished floor, though he could not see where it ended. The glow from the clocks pulsed like candlelight, throwing shadows that danced in unpredictable shapes. Each shadow seemed alive, whispering secrets he could not quite hear. Then he noticed one clock among thousands different from the rest. Its glass face was cracked, its hands trembling violently as if fighting against themselves. He approached it cautiously. Tick-tock, 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 dot. But the rhythm faltered, breaking, shuddering, dot. And then, suddenly click, the second hand stopped. The scientist leaned closer, his breath fogging the cracked glass, and in that frozen second, he saw something impossible. Not his reflection, but a faint image of a child. The boy stared back at him with wide, innocent eyes that were unmistakably his own. His childhood self, trapped inside the glass, lips moving soundlessly. The scientist's heart jolted. He pressed his ear to the clock. Faintly, as if carried through centuries, he heard the boy whisper, "Why did you leave me behind?" He stumbled back, clutching his chest, his mind spinning. Was it a hallucination? A dream memory bleeding into this strange place? He wanted to speak, to answer, but the boy's image blurred, dissolving back into the cracked glass until nothing remained but his own frightened reflection. The corridor seemed to tighten around him, the walls inching closer with each heartbeat. The clocks grew louder, their ticking sharp as knives. He pressed his palms against his ears, but the sound burrowed inside his skull, growing louder, faster, until it became unbearable. And then silence. Every clock stopped at once. The corridor stood utterly still. Every pendulum frozen in mid-swing, every hand halted mid-tick. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the noise. The scientist whispered shakily into the void, "Who has done this?" The voice chuckled softly, warm but unsettling. Not who, when. The words rippled through the air, bending the silence. The scientist clutched the watch tighter. His mind buzzed with questions, but one forced its way out. Then tell me, who controls the clock of existence? A pause. The voice seemed to sigh, almost pitying. No one controls it, not truly, but some touch its rhythm, and those who touch it leave fingerprints you cannot wash away. The scientist's chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. He stepped forward cautiously, the corridor shifting with his movements. Shadows slithered along the walls, stretching long and thin. His every step echoed too loudly, as if time itself was amplifying his presence. The voice grew stronger, surrounding him. You seek mastery, but you do not even understand the prison you live in. You wear chains of seconds and call it freedom. You obey the tick because you fear the silence, do you not? His jaw tightened. The words pierced him because they rang true. How many years had he measured in deadlines, in clocks above laboratory walls, in calendar pages torn away and discarded? Time had ruled him, whispered constantly in his ear, pushed him forward even when he wished to stand still. But something in him resisted. He shouted back into the dark, "I do not obey. I want to understand." The voice hummed with quiet amusement. Then follow. The corridor shifted violently. The walls warped, bending like molten metal. The clocks stretched upward, their faces elongating into strange shapes. Chains of seconds unraveled from their gears, slithering across the floor like serpents. The scientist stumbled backward, his body shaking, but the glowing watch in his hand pulled him forward. It tugged him like a magnet, dragging him into the thickening shadows. He resisted, digging his heels into the smooth floor, but the force grew stronger. Then the darkness split open. A pale hand reached out, fingers long, almost skeletal. It gripped his wrist with icy strength, pulling him toward the fissure in the corridor wall. He gasped, his heart racing, as he tried to tear free. But the hand held firm, pulling him deeper. The watch in his grip pulsed brighter, matching the beat of the unseen heart. "Step through," the voice commanded, "or stay forever," in questions. The scientist's pulse thundered in his ears. He stared at the opening in the wall, a swirling void of shadows and faint golden light. His mind screamed at him to resist, but something else, something buried, a hunger for truth older than fear, drove him forward. He stepped through. The corridor dissolved. Swallowed whole, he fell into silence, and then, gently, his feet touched the ground of another world. It was a garden, but not any garden he had known. The air was thick with fragrance, alive with contradictions. A single tree bloomed with spring blossoms, while its branches dripped with autumn leaves. Grass shimmered green beneath a blanket of winter frost, while flowers bloomed under the heat of a summer sun. All four seasons existed together. Tangled into a single breath, the scientist staggered forward, eyes wide with disbelief. The garden shimmered like a painting brought to life, colors shifting, blending, folding into one another. He knelt down and brushed his fingers against the grass. It was warm. He turned his palm and caught a snowflake. It melted instantly, he whispered to himself, almost in awe. "This is memory." The voice answered him from nowhere, everywhere. "You see at last. Time does not march. It blooms, it withers, it circles. Seasons are its true face, not numbers." The scientist turned slowly, trying to locate the speaker, but the voice remained hidden. His hands trembled as he touched the bark of a tree, watching its blossoms open and die within seconds. "But if this is time," he murmured, "then what am I walking through?" The voice darkened, sharp and low. "You walk through yourself." The words struck him like a blow. His throat tightened. He staggered back, looking around the impossible garden, realizing each season carried something familiar. The flowers reminded him of a childhood summer. The frost mirrored a winter of grief he had never spoken of. The autumn leaves whispered of years lost in regret. This was not just a garden. It was his life. And then, from behind the twisting tree, he saw movement. A small figure, fragile, innocent, a child, stepped into the shifting light, holding a broken watch in his tiny hands. The scientist's breath caught. The boy looked up, and though blurred by distance, the scientist knew instantly it was him, his childhood self. The boy's lips parted, and in a voice soft but heavy with accusation, he asked, "Why did you run away from yesterday?" The scientist's knees weakened, his vision blurred. He wanted to answer, but no words came. The boy stared at him, unblinking, the broken watch glinting in his hands, like a mirror of the one the scientist now carried. The air grew heavy, the seasons clashing violently around them, flowers blooming and dying in rapid succession, snow melting into rain, leaves falling and rising back to branches. The boy stepped closer, his small feet leaving no mark on the ground. His eyes locked with the scientist's. "You can't walk forward if you've abandoned the child who waits behind." The scientist's breath trembled. He tried to speak, to protest, but before the words could form, the boy dropped the broken watch. It shattered soundlessly against the ground, and as it broke, the garden trembled. The colors bled together, blinding, overwhelming. The scientist shielded his face. When he opened his eyes, the boy was gone. Only the broken watch remained, its shards glowing faintly on the grass. The fragments of the broken watch glowed faintly on the frozen grass, their light pulsing like fireflies trapped in shards of glass. The scientist stood trembling above them, his breath clouding in the cold air. His child self had vanished, yet the question lingered like an echo inside his chest. Why did you run away from yesterday? The words weighed on him, heavier than stone, heavier than time itself. He bent slowly, reaching toward the fractured pieces, but as his fingertips brushed them, the shards scattered like startled birds, dissolving into the soil. The glow seeped downward, vanishing into roots hidden beneath the surface. The garden stirred. A low hum rolled across the air, as though the seasons themselves had awakened. The blossoms on the trees trembled, snow melted into rivers, and winds shifted with a restless urgency. The scientist staggered back as the ground rippled beneath his feet, grass bending away from him as though alive. Then, from the heart of the garden, a second voice rose, not the one from the corridor. This voice was deeper, colder, ancient. It did not echo from walls or trees. It came from the air itself, from the fabric of the world. Do you believe you own your time? The scientist froze, his chest tightening. He wanted to answer, to deny, to claim ignorance, but the question struck too close to truth. He could only whisper, trembling, "No, yet you cling to it, scientist. You chase it with instruments, bind it with equations, hoard it in calendars. You dissect it like a corpse and forget it still breathes." The air darkened. The seasons twisted violently. Flowers withered and bloomed in the same breath. Trees shed leaves and grew new ones within seconds. Snow fell and melted before touching the ground. Time collapsed into chaos, unfolding all at once. The scientist shielded his eyes. What is this place? The deeper voice rumbled, slow and deliberate. The garden is no place. It is the mirror of your own existence, a field where your past and future root themselves. You planted it the day you first wondered what time truly was, and it grows each time you flee your answers. The scientist stumbled backward, his heart racing. He felt the truth in the voice, but he refused to surrender. If this is my garden, then let me walk it. Let me see where it leads. The voice fell silent. Then the earth split. A fissure tore through the garden floor, roots snapping like chains. From the opening rose a tree twisted, massive, older than anything he had ever imagined. Its bark was etched with symbols that pulsed faintly, glowing like constellations. Its branches reached so high they pierced the fabric of the shifting sky, where seasons clashed in stormy battle. At the base of the tree, something moved. The scientist squinted, stepping closer. There, among the roots, sat a woman cloaked in shadows. Her face was hidden, her hands cradling something small and fragile. She rocked gently, like a mother with a child. The scientist's breath caught. He felt an inexplicable pull toward her, a sense of familiarity he couldn't name. Slowly, cautiously, he approached. Her voice broke the silence, soft yet sharp enough to cut through his bones. Every second you have ever lived, I have held. Every regret you buried, I have watered. Every moment you wished to keep, I have rocked to sleep in my arms. Do you not remember me? The scientist shook his head, his throat dry. Who are you? The woman tilted her head, and for the first time, he saw what she held. It was not a child, it was an hourglass, but unlike any hourglass he had known. Its sand did not fall down, it fell upward, spiraling in reverse, as though unmaking the very moments it contained. Each grain shimmered like a memory, glinting briefly before vanishing into nothing. The sight made his skin crawl. His pulse pounded in his ears. He whispered, almost to himself, You hold time itself." The woman's hidden face inclined. "No, I hold yours." The hourglass pulsed with light, glowing brighter with each word. The sand inside swirled faster, grains blurring, until they became a storm, a spiral, pulling the scientist's eyes into its heart. He stumbled back, gripping the glowing watch in his hand. But the pulse of his watch now raced to match the hourglass's frantic beat. He realized, with dawning horror, the two were connected. The woman's voice hardened, her rocking growing slower, deliberate. "But time has been asking questions of you." The words struck him like lightning. His chest heaved, as if something inside him had shifted, as if a truth long buried had been dragged into the light. He fell to his knees, gripping the soil, unable to tear his eyes from the hourglass. The sands within began to glow red. The storm inside the glass roared louder, like the rush of blood in his own ears. The grains flew faster, colliding, sparking, until the entire hourglass burned with fiery light. The ground quaked, the colossal tree trembled. Leaves burst into flame, yet did not burn away. The woman whispered, almost tenderly now, and soon, "Scientist, you will have to answer." The hourglass shattered. A burst of light consumed the garden, blinding and absolute. When the scientist opened his eyes, he was no longer in the garden. He was falling through a tunnel of stars and shadows, seasons peeling away from his body like fragile skins. He screamed, but no sound escaped. The watch in his hand glowed brighter, its heartbeat frantic, desperate, and from the void around him, a final whisper echoed. "The clock of existence does not ask who controls it, but who dares to look at it." He plummeted into darkness. He awoke not with a gasp, but with silence. The fall had ended. The storm of stars, the burning seasons, the shattered hourglass. His body lay upon a floor of glass, smooth as frozen water, stretching endlessly into darkness. He lifted his head and saw his reflection beneath him. Endless copies of himself layered downward, each staring back with hollow, tired eyes. The watch still burned faintly in his hand, its heartbeat slower now, as though exhausted from the fall. He pressed it against his chest and listened. The rhythm steadied, but softer, weaker, like a dying flame. Then he noticed the air. It was heavy, too heavy. Each breath weighed on his ribs, thick as lead. The silence pressed into his skull until it felt unbearable. His voice cracked as he forced out a whisper, "Where am I?" Light flickered in the distance. Torches, countless torches, igniting one by one, forming a long passageway that stretched into eternity. The flames burned without smoke, their light casting no warmth, only pale golden shadows. The corridor of glass transformed into a grand hall, arched ceilings high above. walls lined with massive doors carved into stone. Each door was numbered, not with ordinary numbers, but with dates. Some read like memories: 7th of March, 1991, 12th of June, 2004, 3rd of September, 2015. Others bore numbers he did not recognize, years that had not yet come to pass. His skin prickled as he walked past them, the watch in his hand trembling with each step. The hall hummed faintly, the sound of thousands of clocks ticking in unison behind the sealed doors. The air vibrated with their rhythm, like the pulsing of an unseen heart. The scientist's chest tightened. "This is impossible," he muttered. These are, the voice interrupted. "Hours forgotten, stolen, broken. This is where they wait." The deep, cold voice from the garden had followed him here. It filled the hall, woven into the ticking. The scientist froze, his eyes darting across the endless doors. His breath quickened. "Then these are mine. My hours, not yours alone. Every life leaves remnants. Every hour abandoned, every second lost to regret or distraction. They gather here. They do not die, they wait." His knees weakened. He stumbled forward, one trembling hand brushing against a door marked August 14th, 2007. At his touch, the door pulsed faintly. His palm burned, and images exploded across his mind. He was younger, standing in a hospital hallway, his father's voice calling from behind a door he never entered. He had turned away that day, too afraid to face what waited. That hour had slipped from him, unclaimed. The vision shattered. The door fell silent. The scientist collapsed to his knees, clutching his chest. His breath tore out in ragged gasps. Tears blurred his vision. This is punishment," he whispered. The voice hummed, neither cruel nor kind. "No, this is memory. You asked what time is. This is its answer. Time is not your servant. It is your shadow. And every shadow you run from becomes a room you cannot unlock." The words cut deep. He staggered to his feet, fury burning in his chest. He shouted into the hall, his voice cracking against the endless arches. "Then tell me how to escape it. Tell me how to walk free of these shadows." The hall shook. The torches flared. The ticking grew louder, faster. The rhythm of 1,000 clocks colliding into chaos. From the farthest end of the hall, a door began to open. The scientist froze. The heavy stone groaned as it cracked apart, light spilling from within light. It cut across the hall, swallowing the shadows. The voice darkened. "Not every door belongs to you. Some belong to those you've touched, those whose hours you've stolen or wasted. And when their doors open..." The warning trailed off as the white light spread. The scientist shielded his eyes, but curiosity drove him forward. His feet scraped against the glass floor, each step trembling. He moved toward the open door as though pulled by invisible chains. The watch in his hand quivered violently, the heartbeat racing again. He peered into the light and froze. Inside the room was not a memory of his own life, but a laboratory. Bright, sterile lights gleamed on walls of steel. Machines whirred. Equations sprawled across chalkboards. He recognized the place instantly, his lab, but the man inside was not him. It was someone else. A stranger in a white coat, moving like a reflection of himself, but with colder eyes, sharper gestures. The figure turned slowly, as though sensing the intrusion. Their gaze met, and the scientist's blood ran cold. The man in the lab was him yet, not an echo, a possibility, a version twisted by time. The reflection smiled. Finally, it whispered. Lips moving though no sound escaped the room. The watch in the scientist's hand shattered into sparks, and the hall of forgotten hours shook as though it would collapse. The door's white light swallowed the hall, drowning the glow of the torches and silencing the chorus of ticking clocks. The scientist stood frozen, staring into the laboratory where his other self moved with deliberate calm. This version of him, the reflection, was not bound by fatigue or fear. His posture was precise, his hands steady, his eyes clear with a sharpness the scientist had long forgotten. He worked methodically at a desk, scribbling equations that danced with impossible symbols, charts that curved into spirals resembling galaxies. The air in that room vibrated with power. The scientist whispered to himself, breath trembling, "Is that me?" The reflection paused. Slowly, it lifted its head and turned. The moment their eyes met, the world seemed to stop. The scientist felt as though he were looking into a mirror that did not merely reflect, but judged. The reflection smiled faintly, lips curving in a way that was both familiar and alien. It stepped closer to the doorway, closer to the threshold of light that separated them, and then it spoke, not through sound, but directly into his mind. You ask what time is, but what you truly want is not knowledge. It is control. The scientist stumbled backward, his chest tightening. No, I do not lie to yourself. You have measured, dissected, begged the hours to answer you. But deep inside, you wanted the power to silence them, to bend them. The scientist's jaw clenched. Rage rose in his throat, mingling with fear. You're wrong. I wanted to understand. That's all. I wanted to see the truth. The reflection chuckled. It was a low, hollow sound, but it echoed like thunder across the hall. Understanding is only hunger disguised. You wanted to stop the losses. You wanted to trap the moments that slipped away. Tell me, if given the chance, would you not turn back just 1 hour? Would you not steal it back from the grave? The scientist's breath hitched. His mind filled instantly with images: the hospital hallway, his father's voice, the countless regrets scattered through his past. The ache inside him screamed yes, but his lips refused to answer. The reflection stepped even closer, and with each step, the laboratory behind it warped. Machines elongated, wires twisted, walls bent inward, as though the room itself bowed to his will. Equations spiraled off the chalkboard and floated into the air, glowing with impossible fire. I am you, the reflection said, the you who never flinched, the you who broke time and bent it until it sang. And here, in this hall of ours, you are only a guest. I am becoming the master. The scientist's grip tightened around his empty hand only, then realizing the watch was gone, shattered into sparks. His pulse raced. He was unarmed, defenseless. The hall trembled violently. The torches that had lined the walls flickered, snuffed out one by one, leaving only the blinding doorway of white light. The numbered doors rattled on their hinges, as though something behind them clawed to be free. The reflection pressed a hand against the inside of the doorway. The barrier rippled like water. For a moment, the scientist thought he might step through. Then, with terrifying calm, the reflection whispered, "If you keep walking forward, you will meet me again. And next time, I will not wait behind glass." The light burst outward, forcing the scientist to shield his eyes. When he looked again, the door was closed, sealed, silent. The hall was empty once more. He staggered backward, his body trembling. His breaths came sharp and uneven. His legs almost buckled beneath him. He turned slowly, staring at the endless doors, each one a prison of forgotten moments, each one hiding secrets he might never be ready to face. But somewhere in the silence, he felt it, a pull, one door, far ahead, faintly glowing, not white, like the reflection's door, but golden, warm, alive. The scientist's chest tightened. His instincts screamed that this door was meant for him, that behind it waited not a warning, but an answer. Perhaps the answer. Yet, with each step he took toward it, the hall grew colder. The ticking of clocks returned, faster now, louder, as though the entire corridor urged him to turn back. Still, he walked on. His fingers reached for the golden handle. His heart thundered in his chest. He hesitated for only a breath, then pulled the door open. Light spilled across his face, soft and golden, carrying the warmth of a sunrise. His eyes blurred with tears as he stepped inside, and what he saw was not a memory, nor a reflection, nor a season. It was a vast clock larger than mountains, its gears grinding like continents, its pendulum swinging like the arc of planets. Time itself, alive, watching. The scientist fell to his knees. For the first time, he was not asking the question. He was the one being asked. The golden light bathed him, soft at first, then blinding, until the hall of forgotten hours dissolved completely. The scientist stumbled forward, shielding his eyes, and when he lowered his hands, he nearly forgot to breathe. Before him towered the clock. It was vast beyond comprehension. Its face stretched across the horizon, its hands longer than rivers, sweeping not in circles but in spirals that folded back upon themselves. The gears behind it turned like planets grinding against one another, massive teeth sparking as they meshed. Its pendulum was no pendulum at all, but a colossal beam of light, swinging slowly, each arc taking centuries, each swing shaking the very air. The sound was deafening, not ticking, but breathing, a slow, thunderous inhale, then a long exhale that rippled across eternity. The clock was alive. The scientist fell to his knees, his chest heaving. He pressed his trembling palms against the golden floor and whispered through dry lips, "My God." The clock's voice thundered inside his skull. It was not sound, not words, but the deep weight of thought pressed directly against his mind. "You seek me." The scientist froze, his pulse racing. His voice cracked as he forced out, You are time." The pendulum swung and the golden light shifted. The answer came, heavy as stone, dropped into an abyss. "I am not time. I am its witness, its keeper, its hunger." The scientist shook his head violently, his breath quickening. No, you can't be. Time is numbers, measurements, equations. It's not alive. The voice rumbled, shaking the golden floor beneath him. "You mistake your chains for freedom. You measure seconds and call it truth, yet the truth is vaster. You believe you live within time, but time lives within you. It feeds on your choices. It drinks your regrets." The words pierced him, slicing deeper than reason. His heart pounded against his ribs. If that is true, then who controls you? Who winds your gears? The gears groaned. The pendulum swung. The golden hands curled backward, spiraling into impossible shapes. And the voice whispered, softer now, almost tender, you do. The scientist's eyes widened. He staggered to his feet, shaking his head in disbelief. That's not possible. I can't even control my own hours. I've lost so much. I've wasted. The clock's breath roared, cutting him off. Every choice you make, every fear that stills your hand, every dream you abandon, every love you cling to, these are the gears. You have wound me since your first breath. The scientist clutched his head, his thoughts spinning, his body trembling. His mind screamed for reason, for order, but none would come. Then why show me this? Why now? What do you want from me? The pendulum froze mid-swing. The silence was unbearable. The golden light dimmed, shadows stretching long across the floor. Then the answer came, so soft it felt like a whisper pressed against his ear. I want you to stop running. The scientist staggered backward, his heart hammering. His breath tore through him, ragged and shallow. Stop running. The words burned through his chest, heavier than the 1,000 doors of the hall. He thought of the boy with the broken watch, the woman cradling the hourglass, the reflection in the white room. All of them had asked the same thing in their own way. Stop running, but from what? His knees buckled. He collapsed to the golden floor, staring upward at the spiraling clock face. Tears stung his eyes. His voice cracked, almost breaking. Tell me what I'm supposed to do. Tell me how to stop. The golden hands of the clock slowed. The gears groaned. The pendulum twitched, then began to swing again, slower, deeper, as though marking a final countdown. The breath of the clock grew heavier, each exhale dimming the light around him, and then, from deep within its spirals, he heard it faint but clear. A voice not vast and thunderous, but human, familiar. It was his own voice. You already know. The light flickered. The golden floor cracked. Darkness seeped through the fractures, like ink spilling across a page. The clock's breath grew ragged, unstable. The pendulum shuddered, swinging wildly. The scientist scrambled to his feet, panic rising. The floor beneath him split open. Shadows surged upward, swallowing the golden light. The clock's gears ground to a halt with a scream of metal. And then, silence. The golden world shattered, collapsing into blackness. The scientist fell again, tumbling through a void where neither seconds nor centuries mattered, where no breath or heartbeat could anchor him. Yet, in the emptiness, one truth followed him, clinging like a shadow. You are the one winding the clock. He fell, for what could have been an instant or an eternity. The scientist plummeted through the black void. No wind, no gravity, no heartbeat, just falling endlessly. His throat tore as he tried to scream, but no sound escaped him. His hands clawed at nothing. His lungs burned as though he'd forgotten how to breathe. Then dash impact. His body hit something soft, grass, warm, fragrant, alive. He gasped, chest heaving, and blinked against a soft light. Not golden this time, not sterile white, but the gentle glow of a sky that seemed both dawn and dusk at once. The scientist rose slowly, his legs trembling beneath him. He stood in an orchard, trees stretched in all directions, their branches heavy with strange fruit. Some glowed faintly like lanterns, others shimmered like glass, and still others pulsed softly, as though alive with a heartbeat of their own. The air was thick with the perfume of ripeness, sweet and almost unbearable. He stepped closer to one of the trees. Its bark was etched with symbols, equations, numbers, fragments of calendars, and half-faded clock faces. He reached out to touch the trunk, and the tree shivered. From the branches above, a fruit dropped into his palm. It was warm, glowing faintly, and inside its skin swirled images, his own face as a child, laughing under the sun. Running across a field that no longer existed, the fruit pulsed once, twice, then shattered in his hand like glass. The memory vanished, his knees buckled, and he fell, clutching the shards of light as they dissolved into the soil. His voice cracked in horror. No, 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 no. What was that? The orchard answered with silence. But in the distance, between the shifting light of dusk and dawn, he saw them, figures. They walked slowly between the trees, their forms hazy, indistinct. Some were tall, some small, some walked with canes, others skipped like children. Each one carried fruit in their hands. Some clutched it protectively, others let it drip away like sand between their fingers. The scientist staggered toward them, heart pounding. "Who are you?" he cried. "What is this place?" One of the figures stopped. It turned its head, though it had no face, no eyes, and tilted it as if studying him. Slowly, it raised its hand. In its palm glowed a fruit identical to the one that had shattered in his grasp, and inside it, swirling faintly, was the scientist's reflection. Not as he was now, but as he could be, older, wiser, alone. The figure closed its hand, crushing the fruit. The reflection flickered, then died. The scientist's stomach twisted, his breath coming fast. He stumbled backward, colliding with another tree. Its branches shook violently, raining fruit around him. One cracked open against the ground, spilling not seeds but visions. He saw himself succeed, fail, love, betray, live, die. Every choice, every path, every tomorrow, splintered and bleeding out like broken glass. He pressed his hands to his temples, shouting into the orchard, "Stop, please, stop. I can watch this." The trees whispered, the branches groaned, and then, from everywhere at once, came a voice softer than a sigh. "This is the orchard of forgotten tomorrows. Every path you never walked, every choice you never made, every moment you abandoned, they grow here. Do you understand now?" The scientist shook his head violently, tears stinging his eyes. "No, no, I don't understand. Why show me this? Why torture me with what could have been?" The voice deepened, pressing against his chest like a weight. "Because you are not lost in time. You are lost in yourself." The figures turned, then, all of them, and began walking toward him. Dozens, then hundreds, their faceless heads bowed, their hands clutching broken futures. The orchard darkened, the sky shifting to endless twilight. The air grew heavy, suffocating, as though the weight of every tomorrow pressed down on him at once. The scientist stumbled backward, his foot catching on a root. He fell hard, his palms scraping against the glowing soil. His breath came in ragged gasps. The figures loomed closer, silent, relentless, and then, in the shadow of their approach, a single fruit rolled toward him, smaller than the others, flickering faintly inside it. He saw himself, not old, not broken, but here, in this orchard, standing strong, looking back at himself. The fruit pulsed once, twice, and whispered, "Choose." The orchard fell silent. The figures froze mid. The trees held their breath. The scientist's trembling hand reached toward the glowing fruit. His fingertips brushed its warm skin, and the world shattered into blinding light. The light consumed him. It wasn't the warm glow of dawn or the sterile brightness of science. It was blinding, endless, a white fire that stripped away every sound, every breath, every thought. For a moment he was nothing but a heartbeat suspended in eternity. Then air rushed back into his lungs. He stumbled forward, eyes straining to adjust, and found himself standing not in the orchard, but in a quiet room. A window stood open, curtains trembling in a gentle wind. Outside, the sky was painted in the soft gold of late afternoon. On the table nearby, papers were scattered, sketches of clocks and equations written in his own handwriting. He froze. There was a photograph pinned above the desk. His face, but not quite. His hair was flecked with gray, his eyes lined with years of laughter, not exhaustion. And standing beside him was a woman he did not know, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, her smile warm and unwavering. The scientist's throat tightened. He touched the frame with trembling fingers, the glass cool against his skin. "What is this?" he whispered. Whose life is this?" A voice answered from the doorway. "Yours, ours." He spun around. The woman from the photograph stood there, real, alive, eyes shining like she had known him for decades. She crossed the room without hesitation, cupping his face as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Her touch was warm, human. "I've been waiting for you," she said softly. His knees weakened, his voice cracked. "But I don't know you. I've never seen you before in my life," she smiled. Not sad, not angry, just understanding. "Not in the life you remember, but here, in this tomorrow. You chose me. You stayed. You built more than equations and theories. You built a home." The scientist staggered back, shaking his head violently. No, this isn't real. It can't be real. This is a trick." But then he heard it. A child's laughter. He turned, and at the edge of the room stood a boino, older than 8, with hair the color of sunlight and eyes that mirrored his own. The child clutched a wooden clock in his small hands, its gears crooked, its hands spinning backward. "Papa," the boy giggled. "It doesn't work right." The scientist's heart slammed against his ribs. His mouth went dry. He opened his lips to speak, but no sound came. The woman's hand rested on his shoulder, grounding him. "This is the life you never lived," she whispered. "The time you forgot to choose." His vision blurred with tears. He reached for the child, his hand trembling so violently he thought it might shatter. His fingers brushed the boy's arm warm, alive, real dot, and in that instant he felt it. Not the hollow ticking of clocks, not the empty chase of questions, but the raw weight of time itself, moments lived, not measured, but as quickly as joy surged through him. A shadow fell across the room. The window darkened. The air grew heavy. The laughter faltered. The boy froze, his wooden clock slipping from his hands. It struck the floor and cracked open. But instead of wood and gears spilling out, there was only light, white, searing, relentless. The woman gasped, clutching the scientist's arm. Her face blurred, flickering like a candle in the wind. The boy's outline wavered, his smile dissolving into static. "No," the scientist roared, clutching at them both. "Don't take this from me. Don't you dare take this away." The room trembled violently. Walls cracked. The orchard's whisper returned, seeping through the air like smoke. "This is not your life. It was never yours to keep." The scientist fell to his knees, clutching the boy's fading form, his sobs tearing through the collapsing room. "Then why show me this? Why torment me with what could have been?" The whisper curled in his ear, cold as frost. "Because you asked who controls the clock of existence. And now you see. Not you. Never you." The boy's hand slipped through his fingers like mist. The woman's face vanished into the light. The room shattered, glass and walls exploding into fragments of memory. The scientist screamed until his throat ripped raw, and found himself once more in the orchard. The fruit lay shattered at his feet, its glow extinguished. Around him, the faceless figures had moved closer, forming a ring. They held their own fruit tightly, as if mocking his loss. His chest heaved. His tears fell into the soil. He looked up, his voice a broken whisper. "Then tell me, what am I supposed to do? If I can't hold time, if I can't choose my tomorrow, then what am I?" The figures leaned in. The orchard darkened. The voice spoke again, lower than thunder, softer than breath. "You are not the keeper of time. You are its prisoner." The trees shuddered. The soil trembled. And the scientist realized the roots were moving, coiling, creeping toward his feet. The ground breathed. That was the first thing he noticed. The soil beneath him wasn't still. It pulsed, swelled, and sank like the lungs of a sleeping giant. From the cracks between blades of glowing grass, pale roots slithered upward, curling like snakes. They sought him. He staggered back, but the orchard shifted with him. Every step away tightened the circle of faceless figures, their featureless heads tilted, their hands clutching fruit that pulsed like beating hearts. The scientist's voice broke into the silence. "Stay back, stay away from me." But the orchard did not listen. A root coiled around his ankle, cold and damp, pulling him toward the soil. He kicked violently, breaking free, but more surged upward, grasping, relentless. Panic clawed his chest. He fell forward, clawing at the dirt, nails breaking, hands slick with glowing sap. The whisper came again, low and cruel. "Every prisoner becomes part of the cage." The scientist's body shook. No, I'm not. I refuse." He tore the roots from his legs, breath ragged, vision swimming. He stumbled toward the trees, desperate to escape, to run. But the orchard itself shifted. The trees leaned closer, their branches tangling overhead, weaving into a cage of wood and shadow. Their fruit swayed, glowing brighter, each one showing flickers of lives he would never live again. Lovers lost, dreams abandoned, futures stolen. 1,000 versions of himself stared back at him, accusing. He clutched his head, screaming into the prison of branches. "Stop it. Stop showing me what I can't have. I can't carry this anymore." The orchard stilled, and then, slowly, one figure stepped forward, taller than the rest, cloaked in shadow, its hands empty. No fruit, no offering, only silence. The others bowed their heads, as if in reverence. The tall figure bent toward him, faceless, voiceless. The air bent with it, pressing against his lungs, his heart. Then came a sound, not words, but the sharp ticking of a clock, slow, relentless, tick, tick, tick. The scientist covered his ears. The sound only grew louder. His chest heaved, as if each tick were stealing breath from his ribs. And then the voice came, not whispered, not soft, but booming, rattling the orchard's very roots. You cannot escape the orchard. You cannot escape time. You can only surrender. The scientist fell to his knees, body trembling. Tears streaked his face, mixing with the glowing sap of the soil. His voice broke as he cried out, "Then why am I here? Why show me this hell if I have no choice? If I'm already a prisoner, what do you want from me?" The tall figure lowered further. The ticking stopped. Silence stretched like a blade against his throat. It spoke with clarity, to make you see what all prisoners eventually see, that there was never a key. The words sank into him like poison. His chest convulsed. His breath tore ragged from his lungs. His body felt heavy, pulled down by unseen chains. And then the roots surged upward. They coiled around his wrists, his waist, his throat. He screamed as they yanked him toward the earth, the soil splitting open like a wound. The ground swallowed his legs, his hips, pulling him deeper. His fingers clawed desperately at the dirt, but it crumbled through his hands like ash. The faceless figures watched in silence, their fruits glowing brighter as though feeding on his despair. The tall one remained still, towering, patient, eternal. The soil reached his chest, his neck, his mouth filled with dirt. He choked, eyes wide with terror, and then light, blinding, searing white. The roots froze. The orchard stilled. The soil held him, suspended, trapped, but not consumed. His head fell back, gasping air. Above, the canopy of branches had torn open. A single star shone through the gap. It pulsed once, twice, and with every pulse, the roots loosened slightly. The scientist blinked, staring at it, his chest heaving. He didn't know what it was, didn't know if it was salvation or illusion. But something deep in his bones whispered, "Follow it." He reached upward with trembling hands. The star glowed brighter, spilling light across the orchard, burning against the fruit, against the faceless figures. They recoiled, their forms flickering like shadows in a fire. The tall figure hissed, not with words, but with a sound like splitting stone. The orchard shuddered violently, branches tearing, soil groaning, roots writhing. And then, with a final surge of strength, the scientist broke free. He stumbled upward, light swallowing his vision, the star pulling him through. The orchard collapsed behind him. The whisper turned into a roar. "You cannot leave. You are ours. You are time's." But the star consumed it all. And then silence. The silence, after the orchard's roar, was absolute. The scientist floated weightless, body trembling, lungs still raw with dirt and fear. The blinding light that had swallowed him was no longer burning, but soft, endless, golden white. It pulsed gently, like the chest of some vast creature, inhaling and exhaling around him. For the first time in what felt like centuries, he was not falling. He was not sinking. He was suspended, as if the star itself had caught him. He turned slowly, eyes wide, trying to grasp where he was. There was no ground, no sky, only radiance stretching in all directions. But within the radiance floated shapes, vast spirals, glowing threads, clusters of orbs that shimmered and shifted. They weren't stars, not exactly. They were possibilities. He could feel it in his bones. Every glow was a story, every thread a choice, every spiral a world of time unfolding. His throat tightened. His voice was a hoarse whisper. Am I inside time itself? The light answered, not with words, not with sound, but with vibration that sank into his bones. You are inside the breath of what you seek. The scientist closed his eyes, tears gathering against his lashes. The orchard's suffocating roots were still fresh in his memory. The echo of the figure's silent accusations still burning in his chest. And yet here, there was no accusation, no prison, only expansion. But expansion was overwhelming. As he drifted, the glowing threads around him began to move. They coiled gently, reaching for him, brushing against his arms and shoulders. Each touch flooded his mind with visions. He saw himself teaching, writing, traveling, growing old with dignity. He saw himself lost, bitter, forgotten. He saw wars beginning and ending, children born and dying, universes collapsing and exploding anew. Every thread was a path, every glow was a consequence. He gasped, pressing his hands over his eyes. But the visions seeped through his skin, relentless. His voice cracked. Stop, please. I can't hold all of this. I can't be all of this. The star pulsed harder. His body shook with the force. The vibration thundered through him. You asked who controls the clock of existence. The scientist's head snapped upward. Yes. His voice echoed into the infinite glow. Desperate, breaking. Yes, I asked. And no one will answer me. Tell me, is it you? Are you the one? Do you hold it? Do you decide who suffers, who loves, who dies? The star's radiance dimmed, then flared, as if weighing his demand. Finally, the vibration came again, so vast it nearly crushed him. Time does not belong to one. Time does not belong to all. Time breathes because it must. It feeds because you live. It dies because you forget. There is no master, only motion. The scientist's body sagged as if struck. His lips parted, but no words came, only silence. The truth, if this was truth, was emptier than any cage motion. No master, no keeper, just endless, merciless motion. He drifted, chest heavy, eyes glassy. Was that all time was? A wheel without a hand, a tide without a shore. If there was no master, then what was he searching for? What had he fought the orchard for? But then something darker moved in the light, a shadow, faint at first, then sharper, more solid. It drifted between the glowing spirals, consuming their brilliance as it passed. Where it touched, the threads snapped, the orbs dimmed, the spirals collapsed into ash. The scientist's heart jolted, his breath caught in his throat. He whispered, "Not again." The shadow grew taller, wider, forming the outline of something familiar. A figure, cloaked, faceless, the tall one, the one from the orchard. But now it was not confined to roots and soil. Here, in the star's breath, it grew vast, towering, swallowing light itself. The vibrations of the star shuddered, trembled, as though even it feared this intruder. The figure's voice struck him like iron. You cannot outrun what you carry inside. The scientist stumbled backward, though there was nowhere to stand, nowhere to flee. His body shook violently. No, you can't be here. I left you behind, I broke free. The faceless head tilted. The endless dark of its form rippled, swallowing more spirals, more futures. There is no behind, there is no free. You are the prisoner, and I am the warden. The scientist's pulse hammered in his skull. He looked wildly at the collapsing light, at the trembling star, and felt despair claw into his bones. But then his eyes fell on one thread, faint, thin, barely glowing. But unlike the others, it pulsed not outward but inward, coiling around his chest. It tugged, gentle but insistent. A choice, his only choice. His hands shook as he reached for it, the shadow looming, the star trembling. He closed his fingers around the fragile light band. The world ripped open. The thread tightened around his chest, then yanked. The star's light vanished in a single blink. The towering shadow dissolved into smoke. The scientist was ripped through silence, through nothingness, through the hollow spaces between thought and heartbeat. Then impact, he staggered, his knees buckling, his hands scraping against cold stone. The air here was different, thick, metallic, damp, as if every breath dragged rust into his lungs. He lifted his head slowly. He was in a corridor, endless, narrow walls of black glass stretched on both sides, ceiling arched high above. A dim, sickly light dripped from nowhere, just enough to reveal what the glass contained. Mirrors. He rose to his feet, his chest tight. Every step he took, the glass flickered faintly, and reflections moved within. But they weren't just reflections, they were versions. On his left, he saw himself younger, burning with ambition, eyes alight with discovery. On his right, he was older, bent, bitter, hollowed by regret. He walked between them, their gazes cutting into him, whispering from behind the glass. Failure, coward, dreamer, prisoner. Their voices overlapped. Rose became a tide of condemnation. He pressed his hands over his ears, but the whispers lived inside his skull. He broke into a run, boots slamming against stone, breath tearing through his throat. The corridor stretched on and on, reflections warping, twisting. Some showed him screaming, some showed him laughing like a madman, some showed him dead. But then he stopped. There, ahead, the mirrors no longer reflected versions. They reflected him. Only him, present. Now his own face, pale, trembling, eyes wide with terror. He staggered closer, reaching a trembling hand to the glass. His reflection did not follow. It smiled. The scientist's blood froze. His hand dropped to his side, every muscle locking. Slowly, the reflection tilted its head, lips curling wider, eyes darkening to empty pits. Then it spoke, its voice his own, twisted, deeper. I told you. There is no master but the prisoner. And you? It pressed a palm to the glass. Blood bloomed across its hand, dripping, streaking down the surface. You are the warden. The glass cracked beneath its touch, splintering outward. The scientist stumbled back, heart hammering. No, that's not true. I'm not. I've been searching. I've been the reflection. Slammed its hand against the glass. Shards rattled, fissures spreading like veins. Blood seeped through, staining the cracks. Every clock you broke, every choice you abandoned, every tomorrow you killed. The cracks spread to the floor, The corridor shuddered. They did not imprison you. You built the cage. The glass exploded outward. The reflection stepped through. Its body dripped with black liquid that hissed against the stone, its eyes to empty wells. But its movements, its stands were his own, perfectly, terrifyingly. Its body dripped with black liquid that hissed against the stone, its eyes to empty wells. But its movements, its stance were his own, perfectly, terrifyingly. The scientist staggered backward, his breath catching, his voice trembling. If you're me, then what are you? I am the truth you buried. I am the weight you ran from. I am the silence in every tick, the shadow in every second. I am the keeper you sought, and I wear your face. The corridor shook violently, mirrors shattering on both sides. The air turned, sharp, metallic, filled with the stench of iron and dust. The reflection advanced step by step. The scientist tried to flee, but his legs buckled, as though the ground itself pulled him back. He pressed against the cold wall, chest heaving, trapped. The double leaned close, breath cold as stone, and when the orchard called you prisoner, it was only half right. You are prisoner and guard. You locked the door. You threw away the key. You and you alone keep yourself bound. The scientist shook his head violently, tears burning his eyes. No, no, you're lying. I would never chain myself. The double raised its blood-stained hand, placing it gently against his chest. His heart jolted, pain searing through his ribs like fire. He screamed, collapsing to his knees. The double whispered into his ear, "Then why does the key beat inside your ribs?" The scientist's scream echoed down the corridor, swallowed by darkness. The walls collapsed, the mirrors shattered. The corridor fell away into a bottomless abyss, and he fell again, this time with his reflection's laughter ringing in his skull. He was falling. The abyss swallowed him whole, weightless, endless, air tearing at his lungs, though there was no wind. His reflection's laughter echoed, growing deeper, reverberating like thunder in a hollow sky. But then it stopped. Silence. Not the silence of empty space, but the silence of being heard. The silence of something listening. His body froze, suspended, limbs locked. His reflection still drifted near, grinning with those abyssal eyes, but it too stilled, its laughter cut short, as if silenced by a greater authority. The scientist's voice cracked. "Who's there?" The abyss answered, not with sound, but with vibration. A deep resonance shuddered through his bones, through his teeth, through the hollow chambers of his heart. Then came words, layered, infinite, as if spoken by countless mouths across countless centuries. You chase keepers and cages. You wrestle with shadows of your own making. But you have never asked who wrote the law of time itself. The scientist gasped, his voice trembling. Who are you?" The reflection sneered, its smile faltering. "Don't listen," it hissed. "It lies. It always lies." The abyss pulsed again. "I am not prisoner. I am not warden. I am not reflection. I am the contract written before you were born, the first word, the breath that gave the second hand its power. I am the covenant of time." A faint light stirred below, not warm, not golden, but cold, dicey white, piercing like a blade. As he gazed downward, the endless fall shifted. He wasn't plummeting into nothing. He was descending toward a throne carved from obsidian, rising from the void like the spine of some colossal beast. Upon it sat a figure, cloaked in fractured starlight, face hidden, but presence undeniable. The air bent around it, time itself warping, slowing, collapsing into circles that died and restarted with each breath it took. The reflection snarled, "No, you shouldn't be here. This isn't for you to see." It lunged at him, black liquid spraying from its hands like claws. But the throne's figure raised a single finger. The reflection froze mid-strike, suspended like an insect in amber. Its jaw cracked open, but no sound escaped. The figure spoke again, its voice neither kind nor cruel, only inevitable. "Do you see, wanderer? You feared the prison, you feared the warden, you feared the mirror, but you never feared me because you never knew I existed. Every tick of your clocks, every moment you begged to stretch or begged to end, came from me. I am not a jailer. I am the law itself." The scientist's heart pounded. His words barely left his lips. "If you are the law, then why show yourself to me?" For the first time, the figure leaned forward on the throne. Its hood shifted, and beneath it, he glimpsed nothing inanely, a vast emptiness filled with spirals of collapsing galaxies. "Because," the Covenant whispered, "the law is breaking." The abyss trembled. Fractures split the void like shattered glass. The suspended reflection writhed, its grin returning, wider than ever. The Covenant's voice darkened, vibrating through marrow. "The prison was never meant to hold you. It was meant to hold something else. And when you pried at the walls, when you sought to free yourself, you weakened the lock." The reflection laughed again, louder, freer, its bonds cracking. Black liquid spilled from its mouth, its form splitting, growing, twisting into something no longer human. The Covenant thundered, "Now it comes, not prisoner, not warden, not mirror. Something that has no face, no end. And because you searched, because you dared, it will wear you first." The abyss erupted with light. The reflection tore free, shrieking, its body splitting into countless shadows that lunged toward him. The Covenant's final words rang inside his mind as the swarm engulfed him. "Run, scientist. Run into the law you broke, and pray it does not recognize you." The abyss inverted, and he fell again, but this time something was falling with him. He was still falling, but the void had changed. It no longer stretched as endless black. Now it rippled like water, and every ripple carried a reflection, his reflection. Thousands of versions of himself stared back as he plummeted, each one twisting, distorting, cracking with unnatural smiles. The swarm that had broken free from the mirror clawed at him as it fell alongside. Their forms were liquid shadow, their laughter brittle like shattering glass. And with every strike, every brush against his skin, he felt something seep into him, cold, sharp, burning. He gasped. His chest ached, not from breathlessness, but from intrusion. The abyss was bleeding into him, and then he stopped, not physically. His body still tumbled downward, but his mind had frozen. The fall had bent, and suddenly, impossibly, he realized he wasn't falling through the abyss. He was falling into himself. The ripples were not mirrors of another place. They were his memories, his regrets, his unanswered questions. Each reflection was a page torn from his life, stretched and warped by the weight of the abyss. He saw himself, as a child, staring at the clock on his grandmother's wall, wondering why seconds felt so long before bedtime. He saw himself as a young man, pacing through laboratories, obsessed with formulas, chasing numbers as though they would open the universe. He saw himself as the weary scientist, collapsing into sleep, chasing dreams because reality had grown too rigid. Every version of him, every lifetime of thought, was here spiraling around him, pulling him deeper, closer. The shadows whispered as they sank into his veins. "You are not guest, you are doorway." The words echoed from inside his skull. Doorway. His pulse quickened, his fall slowed, but not because the abyss had ended. No, because the abyss was inside him, spreading like ink in water, dragging him into a collapse that had no bottom. He tried to scream, but when he opened his mouth, no sound came. Only black liquid poured from his lips, dissolving mid-air. And then came a new voice, not the covenant, not the swarm, not the reflection. It was his own, but older, weary, eternal. "You wanted to know who controlled the clock of existence," it whispered. "You never asked who wound it first, and now you will be the one who keeps it turning." The swarm shrieked, circling him, pressing against his skin until they melted entirely inside. His veins glowed faintly, pulsing like a clock's second hand. Tick, tick, tick. Every beat of his heart was louder now, not just inside him. It echoed through the abyss. It bent the void. It reshaped time itself. And in that terrifying silence after each tick, he heard it, a heartbeat that was not his own. Deeper, older, stronger. Boom. The scientist froze. The shadows inside him froze too. The abyss rippled violently. For a moment, everything bent into stillness. And then, without warning, the older heartbeat answered again. Boom. The void trembled. His reflections shattered. The swarm screamed. And the scientist understood there was something else here. Something awake now. Something that had always been awake. The Covenant's words roared back into memory. The prison was never for you. The lock was never yours to touch. And as he fell into himself, deeper and deeper, he realized the unthinkable. The abyss wasn't inside him. He was inside it. He was still falling, but the void had changed. It no longer stretched as endless black. Now it rippled like water, and every ripple carried a reflection, his reflection. Thousands of versions of himself stared back as he plummeted, each one twisting, distorting, cracking with unnatural smiles. The swarm that had broken free from the mirror clawed at him as it fell alongside. Their forms were liquid shadow, their laughter brittle like shattering glass. And with every strike, every brush against his skin, he felt something seep into him, cold, sharp, burning. He gasped. His chest ached, not from breathlessness, but from intrusion. The abyss was bleeding into him, and then he stopped. Not physically. His body still tumbled downward, but his mind had frozen. The fall had bent, and suddenly, impossibly, he realized he wasn't falling through the abyss. He was falling into himself. The ripples were not mirrors of another place. They were his memories, his regrets, his unanswered questions. Each reflection was a page torn from his life, stretched and warped by the weight of the abyss. He saw himself as a child, staring at the clock on his grandmother's wall, wondering why seconds felt so long before bedtime. He saw himself as a young man, pacing through laboratories, obsessed with formulas, chasing numbers as though they would open the universe. He saw himself as the weary scientist, collapsing into sleep, chasing dreams because reality had grown too rigid. Every version of him, every lifetime of thought, was here spiraling around him, pulling him deeper, closer, the shadows whispered as they sank into his veins. You are not guest. You are doorway. The words echoed from inside his skull. Doorway. His pulse quickened. His fall slowed, but not because the abyss had ended. No, because the abyss was inside him, spreading like ink in water, dragging him into a collapse that had no bottom. He tried to scream, but when he opened his mouth, no sound came. Only black liquid poured from his lips, dissolving mid-air, and then came a new voice. Not the covenant, not the swarm, not the reflection it was his own, but older, weary, eternal. You wanted to know who controlled the clock of existence, it whispered. You never asked who wound it first, and now you will be the one who keeps it turning. The swarm shrieked, circling him, pressing against his skin until they melted entirely inside. His veins glowed faintly, pulsing like a clock's second hand. Tick, tick, tick. Every beat of his heart was louder now, not just inside him. It echoed through the abyss. It bent the void. It reshaped time itself. And in that terrifying silence, after each tick, he heard it, a heartbeat that was not his own, deeper, older, stronger. Boom. The scientist froze. The shadows inside him froze too. The abyss rippled violently. For a moment, everything bent into stillness, and then, without warning, the older heartbeat answered again. Boom. The void trembled. His reflections shattered. The swarm screamed. And the scientist understood there was something else here. Something awake now. Something that had always been awake. The Covenant's words roared back into memory. The prison was never for you. The lock was never yours to touch. And as he fell into himself, deeper and deeper, he realized the unthinkable. The abyss wasn't inside him. He was inside it. It hung, suspended, like a canvas smeared with shadows that refused to dry. And in that stillness, the sound came again. Boom. Not a sound heard by ears, but by marrow. A vibration that rattled his spine and threatened to tear the fabric of thought itself. Boom. The scientist clutched at his chest, expecting his ribs to crack under the pressure. But he knew, deep within, this was not his heartbeat. His own pulse was quick, frantic, desperate. This one was steady, inevitable, ancient. The reflections around him began to ripple. His child self looked up from the clock with wide eyes. His younger self, bent over chalkboards, lifted his head as though hearing it too. Even the distorted, broken versions of him stopped their warped movements and turned toward the sound. All of them, every version of him, were listening. Boom. The abyss pulsed with light, faint and blue, like veins running through a cosmic body. The scientist realized, horrified, that the void itself was breathing. Each heartbeat pushed the abyss outward, like the chest of a sleeping giant, rising and falling. The swarm within him stirred, whispering frantically, "Do not look. Do not see the heart. You were never meant to see the heart." But he could not stop. He turned, slowly, and there it was. Far below, though in this place below had no meaning, floated a heart. Colossal, suspended in the void, glowing faintly with a cold luminescence. Its every beat sent ripples across the abyss, bending time, bending thought, bending him. He stared in horror, not because it was monstrous, but because it was familiar. It was his, not the fragile organ inside his chest, but an echo of it, a cosmic twin, the heart of his existence, magnified, projected, It was as though the universe itself had carved his essence into stone and forced it to beat forever. His breath shuddered. "That's impossible," the abyss answered, with another thunderous boom. And then he understood why it terrified him so deeply. It wasn't beating on its own. It was waiting, boom, for him. The swarm screamed, clawing at his insides. The reflections shattered like glass, their pieces drifting away into the void. The massive heart shuddered and spoke not with words, but with rhythm. Tick, boom, tick, boom. Time itself was breathing with it. The Covenant's voice drifted back to him, cold as frost. "The law is breaking. The keeper is gone. And now the clock must choose another hand to turn its wheel." The colossal heart pulsed brighter. Its veins split open, spilling rivers of light that reached for him, curling like tendrils. He shook his head violently, his voice cracking. "No, I didn't come here for this. I only wanted to know. I only wanted to understand." The abyss bent around him. The tendrils wrapped closer, pulling him toward the heart, pulling him into inevitability. The swarm's final whisper slithered across his mind. "You are doorway. You are vessel. You are not the one who asked. You are the one who will answer." The colossal heart pulsed once more, louder, stronger, deafening, and with that beat he felt his own chest stop. His chest was still no heartbeat, no pulse, only silence. His body drifted in the abyss like a puppet with its strings cut, but his mind was aflame. He felt the colossal heart's pull, dragging him closer, demanding his surrender. But somewhere inside, a flicker of rebellion stirred. Don't know. The word wasn't shouted. It wasn't even spoken. It was whispered, fragile as smoke. Yet the moment it formed, the abyss rippled. The colossal heart, Quivered. No. The whisper grew louder, echoing against the black. His dead chest throbbed faintly, a ghostly tick against the silence. His body twitched, resisting the tide, and the abyss reacted. The rivers of light that had spilled from the heart froze midair. The swarm within him screeched, clawing wildly as though his resistance burned them alive. The shattered reflections that had drifted into nothingness snapped back into shape, their broken fragments reassembling with jagged edges. The colossal heart thundered boom. But for the first time, it sounded strained. His whisper became a growl. "I am not your vessel." And time cracked. The abyss splintered, reality fracturing like ice beneath heavy boots. Images surged through the cracks, 1,000 versions of the same moment, overlapping, colliding. He saw himself still falling. He saw himself already swallowed by the heart. He saw himself seated upon the obsidian throne. He saw himself gone, the collapse bent around him. Past, present, and future tangled like snarled threads. And he understood. Resisting the heart was not defiance of time. It was rewriting it. The swarm inside him wailed, "You fool! The law does not bend breaks. You are tearing it apart." The colossal heart convulsed, its beat faltering. Veins of light ruptured, spilling rivers of brilliance that blinded the abyss. For the first time, its inevitability seemed vulnerable, and in that crack of weakness, he felt power. The reflections swarmed him, no longer distortions, but half-formed selves, begging, pleading, pulling at his arms and legs. "Choose," they cried, in voices identical to his own. "Choose a thread. Choose a path before the abyss devours itself." But how could he? Every version of him was screaming. Every timeline demanded to be born. His lips trembled. "What happens if I don't choose?" The swarm answered, its voice shrill and ecstatic. "Then the heart will not only stop, it will never have beaten at all." The colossal heart let out one final, shuddering boom. A silence followed, vast and trembling. The tendrils of light writhed, desperate to seize him before the last beat fell quiet. And in that silence, the scientist knew. He wasn't just resisting the law, he was unmaking it. The silence stretched, the colossal heart hung before him, trembling, veins of light splitting wider, bleeding brilliance into the abyss. Its next beat never came. The pause lengthened, heavier than eternity. And then the abyss itself shuddered like a fabric torn at the seams, and the seams split. Time poured out. It did not flow like water, but like threads. Millions of glowing strands, unraveling from the heart, whipping through the void in furious waves. They brushed against him as they passed, and each touch was a life. He saw himself holding a candle in childhood, afraid of the dark. He saw himself speaking his first discovery aloud, trembling with pride. He saw himself lying in a hospital bed, fragile, old, whispering goodbyes. The threads tangled around his limbs, knotting, tightening. He screamed, but the sound broke into echoes, each one belonging to a different version of himself. He heard his voice as a child, as an elder, as a stranger who had never been born. The swarm inside him shrieked with delight. It unravels. At last, it unravels. The reflections surged back, no longer broken, but multiplying 10, 20, 1,000, all of them wearing his face, all of them clawing at the threads, as though to claim one for themselves. The abyss spun like a whirlpool, pulling everything inward toward the fractured heart. The strands lashed like serpents, colliding, fusing, tearing apart. And as the scientist struggled, he realized the horror. These weren't just his lives, they were everyone's. He saw a woman clutching a newborn. Beneath the stars, he saw a king kneeling before his crumbling empire. He saw a soldier running through fire, lungs bursting with smoke. He saw the last tree on a dead planet dropping its final seed into dust. Past and future, near and far, human and alien, all lives tangled together in the storm. Time itself had no shape now. It was collapsing into chaos, feeding on itself, consuming everything it once held steady. The colossal heart cracked. A fissure split across its glowing surface. From it poured not light, but shadow dense, suffocating, endless dot, and in that shadow, a shape moved, something older than the heart, something that had been caged within it. The swarm hissed with reverence. It wakes. The one the lock was meant to hold. The scientist fought against the threads. But the more he pulled, the tighter they strangled. His lungs screamed for air, his chest burned, and in that desperation, he realized he could not stop this unraveling. But he could choose which thread he followed. The reflections screamed at once, their voices jagged with madness. "Choose me." "No, this one." "Follow the path where you live. Follow the path where you never existed at all." The colossal heart groaned, another fissure splitting its surface. The shadow inside pressed against the cracks, its vast form writhing, stretching, tasting freedom. The scientist clenched his teeth, staring at the glowing threads coiled around his arms, his chest his throat. Which life would he seize? Which existence would he bind himself, tuning that the others would vanish into nothing when he chose? The shadow whispered from the breaking heart, its voice older than creation itself. Choose nothing, and I will choose you. The cracks widened, the colossal heart split down the middle, spilling not light but a torrent of shadow so vast it drowned the abyss in a single breath. The threads of time snapped and recoiled, writhing like severed nerves. Lives, moments, histories all tore loose and dissolved into ashdod, and from that abyssal wound it stepped forth, no face, no body, only a shifting mass of void, clothed in fragments of broken stars, towering and endless. Every time the scientist tried to look, its form changed, an eclipse, a storm, 1,000 hands reaching from a single point, its voice a vibration that bled into the marrow of every reflection. Every thread, I was the silence between seconds. I was the hunger caged in the heartbeat. You searched for the keeper of the clock, and you have found the hunger that waits when the clock stops. The scientist's throat tightened. His limbs jerked against the glowing threads, but they only dragged him closer. His reflections wailed, some begging for release, others chanting with manic devotion, "Let it take you. Let it take you. Let it take you." The swarm inside him pulsed violently, almost ecstatic. Do you see now? You were never searching for knowledge. You were the path it needed. You are the hinge on which the lock breaks. The figure, Lindor, perhaps the void itself, bent toward him. Where its face might have been, the shadows thinned, and within he saw himself. Not a reflection, not a distortion. His own body, older, thinner eyes, hollow, staring back at him with unbearable grief. His voice cracked. What are you? The being answered by stretching a hand or what looked like one toward him. Threads of time bent instantly, sucked into its palm, vanishing into nothing. I am what comes after clocks. The scientist's pulses real pulse throbbed once more, faint, defiant. He felt the choice pressing down upon him, the weight of inevitability. He could surrender to the being, become its vessel, the hinge that let it loose across all timelines, or he could seize one thread, any thread, and bind himself to it, collapsing all others, sealing away what had been set free. His hands trembled. The glowing strands coiled tighter, dozens of lives pressing against his skin. A mother's laugh, a soldier's scream, a child's first word. The weight of existence itself was in his grasp. The being's voice deepened, so vast it threatened to crush him. Choose nothing, and I will write the end for you. The colossal heart cracked open entirely, collapsing into shards of light that spiraled into darkness. The imprisoned being stretched higher, taller, consuming even the reflections of the abyss. And as its hand reached for him, the scientist clenched his jaw, his fingers curling around a single glowing thread. But which one? The abyss held its breath. The abyss quivered. The single glowing thread burned in the scientist's grip, searing into his palm. Each pulse carried not just light, but lives 1,000 voices, whispering fragments of existence into his bones. He wanted to scream, but the swarm inside him howled louder, twisting his veins like molten wire. The imprisoned being loomed closer. Its hand stretched endlessly, and every motion shredded time like brittle glass. Where it touched, reflections shattered into black dust. swallowed by its shape. One thread will collapse the rest, it murmured. But which thread do you believe was ever yours? The scientist's breath trembled. The thread flickered between shapes, sometimes the laughter of a child, sometimes a battlefield drenched in blood, sometimes the sterile silence of an empty laboratory. His heart thudded. Which was real? Which belonged to him? A dozen of his reflections lunged at him, their mouths stretched wide in fury. Don't touch it. It's mine. You'll doom us all. The glowing strands binding him grew taut, jerking his limbs violently, as if each version of himself fought for dominance. His chest burned as the swarm surged, eager, ravenous, ready to tear itself free if he faltered. The imprisoned being leaned closer, its voice dripping with something between command and seduction. Drop the thread. Let me be the choice. I have waited through the silence of eternity for a vessel. You are that vessel. Give me your pulse, and I will give you release. The scientist closed his eyes, the pressure unbearable. He felt his pulse fading thinner with each beat, as though his very heart were surrendering. But deep inside, beneath the swarm, beneath the screaming threads, there was a flicker, a memory, a hand gripping his, a warmth that wasn't borrowed from any reflection, a moment that wasn't supposed to exist. He gasped. His eyes flew open. The thread in his grasp glowed brighter, fiercer, no longer shifting. It was steady now, radiating a warmth unlike the others. The imprisoned being recoiled, shadows writhing. No, not that one. The scientist's voice cracked, but he spoke anyway. This one was mine. The thread tightened around his wrist, embedding into his skin like molten fire. The swarm shrieked, thrashing wildly, trying to tear free. His reflections screamed in unison, breaking apart into static and smoke. And then the entire abyss shuddered, a sound like worlds grinding against each other. The colossal heart's fragments spun backward, threads lashing wildly, converging toward the point where he stood. The imprisoned being raised both its vast, formless arms. Voice booming like thunder split across 1,000 skies. You dare bind yourself to a false memory, then you shall become the ruin of all memory. The void convulsed. The chosen thread flared, threatening to either anchor him or consume him whole. And as the shadows surged, swallowing stars, the scientist felt his last pulse thunder through him, an impossible, defiant beat. The abyss braced for collapse. The abyss screamed. It was not a sound carried on air, but a tearing of silence itself, as though reality's skin were ripped open. The scientist stood trembling, the chosen thread burning like liquid fire wound through his bones. His body felt too small, too fragile, for the weight it now carried. All around him, threads snapped one by one. Each break was a death cry, the end of entire possible lives. Shadows flared like black storms, reflections shattered, and every fragment of himself bled into the void. The imprisoned being loomed taller than ever, its outline a storm of collapsing time. Its eyes, if they were eyes, burned like two imploding suns. You tether yourself to a single memory. Fool, the thread you clutch cannot hold the weight of existence. But the scientist, despite his quivering frame, did not let go. He pressed the glowing strand deeper into his chest until it anchored into his heart itself. His veins pulsed with its light. The swarm inside him convulsed, shrieking, clawing at his organs, desperate to escape before being bound with him. He whispered through gritted teeth. This is not just a memory. This is the choice I was never allowed to make. The thread blazed brighter, spilling light into the abyss. For the first time, shadows faltered. For the first time, the imprisoned being hesitated. But hesitation was not defeat. The being roared, and its voice was a tidal wave of ruin. Then let that choice break you. Its arms stretched wide, and from its body poured a flood of broken threads, snapped echoes of every life, every version of the scientist that had ever been denied. They surged toward him, screaming, their faces twisted with betrayal. He staggered, his hands shook. The swarm inside him swelled like a storm about to burst. The chosen thread, it grew so bright that his flesh turned translucent, bones glowing with each pulse. He was no longer holding the thread, he was becoming it. But becoming a thread meant unraveling himself. His reflections closed in. Some begged, some cursed, some clawed at his skin as though trying to peel him away from the strand of light. And still he did not let go. The imprisoned being bellowed, shaking the abyss. If you cling to it, you will burn. If you release it, you will vanish. Either way, you are mine. The scientist's lips parted. His breath was ragged. His eyes locked on the being, glowing faintly now with the same light as the thread. He whispered, I am not yours. I am theirs. And as the words fell, the chosen thread flared like a newborn sun. The abyss twisted, writhing, tearing apart at its seams. The colossal heart's fragments spun into violent orbit, chains of light snapping and sparking. Shadows tore into ribbons, consumed by the blaze. The swarm inside him screamed one last time, then either dissolved or merged. Even he could not tell. For one fragile instant, there was silence, and then a crack split through the abyss, jagged and blinding, stretching outward into infinity. The world was coming undone. The imprisoned being's form fractured, spilling darkness into the light. You will not escape, it howled. You cannot outlive me. The clock obeys only the void. The scientist's grip tightened around his burning chest, the last pulse of the chosen thread beating inside him, and he whispered back, with trembling defiance, then let the clock break. The abyss roared open, blinding, endless, swallowing everything, and the chapter ended in the moment before either light triumphed or collapsed forever. The world was gone. There was no up, no down, no abyss to stand in. Only a vast sea of unraveling light and crumbling dark, stitched together by cracks that stretched into infinity. The scientist floated within it, his body little more than a silhouette. His pulse had slowed so much that he wondered if it had stopped entirely yet somehow. He still remained. The imprisoned being writhed in the distance, its vast form fragmenting, reforming, and fragmenting again. Every time it tried to gather itself, the light from the thread struck like a blade, slicing through its shape, scattering pieces of it into the void. But still it did not die. You cannot hold it, the being thundered, voice trembling with both fury and dread. The thread you clutch was never meant for one heart alone. You will rip yourself apart before it obeys you. The scientist's vision blurred. Light bled from his eyes, dripping like molten stars. His hands were raw and trembling, burned into bone by the thread's impossible heat. He felt himself hollowing out as if the thread was not filling him with power, but consuming him to sustain itself. And yet, Within the pain was clarity. For every shred of agony, he felt a memory. The sound of rain against glass, the hum of machines in an empty laboratory, the curve of a smile he thought he had lost. These were not illusions. They were the marrow of his being, proof that even in a fractured world, something had belonged to him. He whispered through cracked lips, voice nearly drowned in the storm. It's not meant for one heart. Then let it be for every heart I carry. The imprisoned being froze, shadows convulsing as though struck. The scientist stretched his arms wide. The thread pulsed violently, a shockwave of light blasting outward. The burning strand split into dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of smaller threads, each unraveling from his own chest. They flared across the void like rivers of fire, weaving through the collapse, latching onto the broken fragments of worlds. Each thread carried a piece of him. Each was a sacrifice. Each was a surrender. The abyss screamed louder. The imprisoned being thrashed, clawing at the storm. Its form split into thousands of faces, each howling curses and prayers, desperate to anchor itself before the light dissolved it. Stop, it cried. You will end yourself. You will end everything. But the scientist did not stop. The more he let go, the stronger the light became. His body was breaking, dissolving into pure luminance. His heartbeat was barely a flicker, but every flicker shook the abyss like a drumbeat of war, and then a silence, a breath. The collapse froze, suspended, as if the entire void inhaled at once, for a single impossible moment. Time itself seemed to wait. The imprisoned being stared across the endless gulf, its vast form crumbling like ash. Its voice fell to a whisper, barely audible. What have you done? The scientist, glowing like the final ember of a dying fire, smiled faintly. His lips moved, but his words were not carried on. Sound, they were carried on the threads themselves. I gave it back. And then the abyss fractured. Completely, light and shadow clashed in a cataclysm, so fierce that the concept of silence itself was erased. The imprisoned being was ripped apart, devoured by its own echoes. The scientist vanished into the flood of threads, his body dissolving into the very fabric he had once feared. All that remained was the moment between breaths, eternal pause, where everything could either end or begin again. There was no sky, only the echo of silence, stretched wide like a shroud over what had once been the abyss. Fragments of light drifted slowly through the void, glowing like embers in water. They rose and fell in no direction, caught in the invisible tide of something larger than gravity, and in the midst of that emptiness, something flickered. The faint outline of the scientist's form hovered where the explosion of threads had been brightest. He was translucent now, barely more than a shape woven from glimmering strands. His heart no longer beat with the rhythm of blood, but with the rhythm of light. Each flicker a pulse that tethered him to what little remained. The imprisoned being was gone yet not gone. Its absence was not victory, but unease, like a silence after thunder that promised the storm had only moved beyond sight. Shadows lingered at the edges of the hollow dawn, thin, restless, whispering as though waiting for their master's return. The scientist drifted among the floating fragments, each one a shard of possibility. He reached out, and when his fingers brushed a piece, it flared with images, a family's laughter at a dinner table, A city rising under golden sunlight, a child sleeping beside a broken toy. Lives that could have been lives that might yet be. But the more fragments he touched, the more he felt the weight of them press against him. They were not choices, they were burdens. Each one longed for form, for existence, for reality. And Helon, unraveling, was the only vessel they could cling to. His chest burned with the strain. The threads that composed his body quivered, threatening to snap. "You cannot carry them," a voice whispered. It was faint, everywhere and nowhere at once. He turned, but there was no figure, only the shimmering vastness of broken light. He whispered back, trembling, "If not me, then who?" The silence deepened. The drifting embers pulsed, as if listening, but then, from the edges of the void, came a new sound, faint cracking, like ice splitting across a frozen river. The scientist's eyes widened. Beyond the fragments, beyond the drifting light, the shadows thickened. They pressed against the hollow dawn, straining, cracking its fragile shell. The imprisoned being had not been destroyed. It had been scattered, and now it gathered again, piecing itself from the fractures, preparing to return. The scientist's form flickered, unstable. His time, if such a word still had meaning, was running out. He clutched at his chest, feeling the last threads of himself unravel. And yet, even as despair coiled in his bones, a strange calm filled him. He looked at the fragments, at the lives waiting to be born, and he whispered to them as though two children, "Not yet, but soon I will find the way." The shadows cracked the horizon wide open, and a torrent of darkness surged inward, swallowing the drifting embers. The hollow dawn trembled, ready to collapse, and in its center, the scientist, half light and half nothing, spread his arms once more, ready to burn or to vanish,